In Laboratory Reddit, today's story is...
I canceled my wedding when I saw that my fiancé invited my school bully as a surprise. Right now, I should be enjoying my honeymoon, instead of being here writing on Reddit looking for advice from strangers. Life can take unexpected and painful turns. I was supposed to be in Greece with Duncan, 28, the man I considered to be the love of my life for 3 years, until he decided to stab my trust in the back. Our relationship was always stable and calm, which makes me wonder if maybe I'm overreacting by making such a big deal out of what he considers to be a simple harmless joke. In my high school years, there was a student named Aaron who was your typical school bully. He excelled at sports but was mediocre at everything else, and was characterized by his cruelty for no reason. I know there is this current trend, thanks to Disney, of looking for sad stories behind every villain to justify their actions. But in Aaron's case, there was simply nothing to redeem. He was a despicable, stupid, and unpleasant individual. With the kind of things he did at school, he should have ended up in a juvenile detention center. The problem was that his father had an important position in our small town, which made him untouchable. Everyone at school, including the teachers, knew about his behavior, but no one dared to confront him. It got to the point where I decided to take action and went to the principal to lodge a complaint. He promised to investigate and take action, but after a month, nothing had changed and Aaron was still behaving the same. This time I returned with my father. With his experience, my father insisted that the principal registered the complaint in writing. At the time I was too young to understand, but I now realize that my father was creating documented evidence that could not be denied if we needed to escalate the matter beyond the school. The situation became more serious. Aaron was summoned and his parents were called. His father never showed up, claiming to be busy. They tried his mother, but she didn't show up either. This was repeated 3 times without success. In the end, it all came down to a simple verbal warning from the principal, threatening consequences if the behavior continued. It was evident to everyone, especially Aaron, that these threats were empty. This only served to significantly worsen his behavior. What had previously been simple insults became more elaborate bullying. He would bribe cafeteria staff to put bugs in my food, spread glue on my seat to ruin my clothes, and find ingenious ways to torment me without leaving direct evidence of physical or verbal abuse. The worst part was that his actions seemed to amuse everyone else, and when I complained, I was labeled as an exaggerator with no sense of humor. Although a decade has passed, the nightmares persist and my hatred for Aaron remains intact. I don't care if rumors say he has changed, I feel no obligation to forgive him and never will. When I went away to university out of state, I buried those memories as deep as I could. I only occasionally saw Aaron in group photos on social media through mutual friends, but for me, that chapter of my life had ended when I left school. Although the trauma persisted, I had mentally distanced myself from those memories. My relationship with Duncan began 3 years ago and we connected quickly. However, 6 months in, he tried to play a joke on me. He prided himself on being the joker of his group, something he had mentioned to me at the beginning of our relationship. I had made it very clear to him that jokes brought back bad memories and that I did not tolerate them. He seemed to understand, but he still tried to play one on me. I managed to catch him out and avoid it, which triggered our worst argument yet. I was on the verge of ending the relationship when he played down the situation, saying that I was exaggerating and that I needed to develop a sense of humor. The situation escalated until, overwhelmed by memories of school, I told him my whole story with Aaron. He was silent and then sincerely apologized, admitting that he did not know about my traumatic past. I decided to give him another chance, and for the next 2.5 years, he respected my boundaries, until the day of our wedding. He had completely forgotten that initial incident with the jokes. Everything had been resolved and his regrets seemed genuine. On the day of the wedding, everything was going perfectly. It was an intimate ceremony with friends and close family, and I felt completely happy and confident in my decision. Duncan had mentioned weeks before that he had invited a special guest, but I didn't think much of it, thinking that perhaps it would be his grandmother, whom I appreciate very much and who had initially said she would not be able to attend. Half an hour before the ceremony, the problems began. I couldn't get in touch with Ilwas, my main bridesmaid. My calls didn't connect. I tried Samantha and Nia, other bridesmaids, with the same result. Alarms went off in my head and I called Jonah, Duncan's best man, who informed me that he couldn't find any of my bridesmaids. I asked my mother to contact my father to investigate the situation. When she came back nervous saying that nobody knew where they were, I started to hyperventilate. I asked Jonah not to alert Duncan, not knowing that it was all part of his plan. I decided to investigate on my own and went to the wedding hall. What I saw paralyzed me. Aaron was in the entrance. I remember nothing but the shock and my collapse. They had to carry me because my body was not responding. In the midst of the chaos that followed, Duncan appeared worried, but when I recovered, he began to laugh, saying that my reaction had been the best joke he had made in years. When my bridesmaids finally appeared, they explained that they had been locked in a room with no signal on their phones. Duncan had summoned them there and Aaron had locked them in. I asked Elias, my friend from school who knew the whole story with Aaron, why he was there. She confirmed that Aaron was the special guest Duncan had spoken about. Still confused, I asked to speak to Duncan alone. He tried to postpone it until after the ceremony, but I insisted. I asked him why he had invited Aaron, especially considering that he had shown him photos of the school and knew exactly who he was. He explained that Aaron had been working in the same building as him for a few months and they had become friends. When Aaron found out that I was Duncan's fiancé, he was apparently very happy, thinking that we had a friendly relationship. When I questioned why Duncan had befriended Aaron, he replied that Aaron had told him the truth, that he wasn't a stalker but a joker, and that I was too sensitive. Duncan had decided it would be a good idea to invite him to the wedding to bury the hatchet. At that moment, something broke inside me. Without thinking, I took off my ring and handed it to him, declaring that the wedding was cancelled. I went out, announced the cancellation to the guests, thanked them for coming and left with my family. My friends took care of the rest, although they have avoided telling me the details so as not to cause me any more stress. A week has passed and Duncan has not stopped trying to contact me. He constantly calls my phone and my parents' phone. His family also tries to communicate with me, but I have cut off all contact. I can't think clearly, and to make matters worse, Duncan is defaming me on social media, saying that I couldn't handle a simple joke and that I'm an overreactor. Everything is a mess and I don't understand how we got to this point. Our relationship was perfect and none of this should have happened. I don't understand what motivated him to make this joke. I'm not even sure why I made such a drastic decision. Seeing Aaron triggered all my traumas, but it was Duncan's justification that really made me lose control. I couldn't believe that the man who knew me so well, to whom I had entrusted my most traumatic experiences, had chosen to believe my abuser over me. He hadn't even mentioned to me that Aaron worked in his building. Now everyone says I overreacted and that it was silly to throw away a 3-year relationship over a joke. My parents and friends support me, but they insist that eventually I will have to talk to Duncan. I know they are right, but I don't know what to say. I am beginning to doubt my decision. Maybe the others are right and I could have handled the situation differently, instead of taking such drastic measures. I don't know what to do or what the future holds for me. Update 1. 2 weeks have passed since my initial post, and I have had time to reflect on the events and my reaction. It has not been an easy process, but it was necessary. I have read each of your comments and, although I have not responded to all of you, I am deeply grateful for your advice. Coming here for help was the right decision. Your comments have helped me see aspects that I was willing to ignore just because my ex-fiancé considered himself a joker. I hadn't realized how bad the situation was and how humiliating it was for me as a couple. I am especially grateful to those who pointed out the inappropriateness of Duncan's behavior because, despite the good years we had together, his actions are unforgivable, at least from my perspective. It is interesting to see how, given that we had not yet spoken about what happened on the wedding day, he continues to criticize me publicly while privately begging me to talk. To put an end to this situation, I agreed to meet with him yesterday. When he suggested coming to my house, I insisted on meeting in a public place. We met in a cafe, and the meeting was terrible. Naively, I had hoped to find some regret on his part, that he had used this time to reflect and understand my reaction, but it was not to be. His arrogance remained intact, and I had had enough. He began by accusing me of having overreacted and of having embarrassed him socially. He insisted that the joke was not that bad and did not justify my excessive reaction. I let him express himself fully before dismantling his arguments one by one. I questioned his strange decision to invite Aaron to the wedding. What made him think that bringing my stalker would be appropriate on the most special day of my life? His response was to mock me, saying, "I know what a great stalker he was, Mel." I never imagined he would stoop to such a level of cruelty, but perhaps I had never really known this side of him. It took all my self-control not to react violently. I told him that if he preferred to believe a stranger over his future wife, there was nothing more to discuss and I was glad we had called off the wedding. He responded with a gesture of annoyance, treating the matter as a simple fight rather than a definitive breakup. He insisted that I was being dramatic for no reason and needed to calm down in order to talk rationally. I replied that there was nothing more to say between us, as he clearly did not believe me and had chosen to believe my stalker. And all for what? For a few laughs that nobody else found funny. It wasn't even a clever joke. Then he said something that made me lose whatever respect I might have had left for him. He said he was willing to forgive me and take me back despite my childish behavior, but that I should publicly admit that I had exaggerated. It was like talking to a wall. He remained so closed about the whole matter, convinced that I was to blame, and at that moment I understood that he really believed it. He kept insisting that I needed to stop taking everything so seriously, and I had had enough. His attitude was unbearable and I had no interest in continuing the conversation. I gave him the ring and I think that was when he finally understood that I was serious about our breakup. His attitude changed instantly in a pathetic way. He began to beg me to reconsider my decision, admitting that he had made a mistake. The change was repulsive because it was obviously false. I told him that if he needed the ring back to understand the gravity of his mistake, then he was still as immature as a high school student. I made it clear to him that we were definitely over and there would be no reconciliation. He begged me to stay and continue talking, but I had already made my decision. As I left the cafe, I felt an indescribable mixture of relief and strength. Since then he has not stopped calling and sending messages, apologizing and saying that he now understands his mistake, but I have not responded. What good are these apologies now that I have canceled the wedding and returned the ring? I no longer need his empty apologies. I know this will hurt in the long run. 3 years together and plans for a life together are not easily forgotten. In a few days, the magnitude of all this will probably hit me. But it is what it is. I can't force myself to be with him again. Not only did he betray my trust, but I have lost all respect for him, and for me there is no going back. So yes, 3 years and all our plans are gone, but at least I can sleep peacefully knowing that I made the right decision for me. Update 2. Following the advice of many of you, I decided to clarify the situation publicly. After our meeting, Duncan was active on social media and very insistent for a few days, until he suddenly went quiet. I thought he had finally understood that it was over between us and that good judgment had prevailed. I was wrong. Alois called me in alarm to inform me that Duncan had posted an extensive story on Facebook and Instagram. It was an obvious and biased attempt to gain sympathy. Any remaining respect I might have had for him vanished when I read what he had written. He had described me in every possible negative way, claiming that I was the cause of his distress because I was supposedly jealous of him making new friends, specifically Aaron. He portrayed me as a controlling and unhinged partner, claiming that I had always been like that and that he had had to sacrifice friendships because of me, which never happened. He tried to present me as a toxic woman who had problems with anyone who wasn't me. He went so far as to suggest that I was insecure about a friend I had made at the office and, according to him, the worst thing was that as he was a man, there was no possibility of anything happening between them. He presented himself as understanding and submissive, saying that he would have understood my reaction if his friend had been a woman. But given that I was acting this way because of a male friend, going as far as to cancel the wedding and reject reconciliation, it showed that I was self-centered, insecure and narcissistic. He used every negative word he could find to defame me. I never thought he would stoop so low, but he proved me wrong again. I knew I needed to do something to control the damage. The situation was getting out of hand and it was time to take the offensive before he whitewashed his actions and became the victim. It took me a whole day to organize my thoughts and write my response. The post is too long to include here, but basically I said the same things I shared in my original post. I made sure to mention the bullying I suffered at the hands of his new friend at school and how, from the beginning of our relationship, I had expressed my dislike of this kind of joke to him. I was direct and honest, not trying to sugarcoat things, but I didn't lie either. Every word I shared was true, and that was precisely what Duncan couldn't accept. The impact of my post was huge. All the people who had criticized me and comforted Duncan were now sending me messages apologizing and showing their support. I was flooded with messages and calls, surprisingly none from Duncan. I only got one message from him the next day calling me a stupid bitch and that was it. I decided to block his numbers because I no longer need his presence in my life or more drama. What was most surprising was receiving a message from his mother. I've always liked her, although we haven't been particularly close. She explained that Duncan had told her a very different version of events and she regretted not having asked me before. She admitted that she had believed her son and now realized that it was a mistake. She apologized on his behalf, although I told her it wasn't necessary. Of all the people who contacted me, his apology seemed the most sincere, and he didn't even have to apologize. It wasn't his responsibility for his adult son to behave that way. Fortunately, I have not had any contact with Aaron and I know I won't. If he had the nerve to participate in that stupid joke on my wedding day, I can imagine how much he has matured in all these years, absolutely nothing. The narrative has now changed and people are criticizing Duncan both for his behavior and for lying to gain sympathy on social media. It's sad how things have turned out for him. It's also sad for me because the adrenaline of all this drama will soon pass and I fear that moment when I have to face reality. It's inevitable and I think it's time to take off the blindfold. I've spent a long time alternating between keeping afloat and sinking in this mess. It's time to move on. I owe it to myself and to my parents and friends who have supported me throughout this episode. Thanks to everyone who supported me and helped me to stand firm in my decision because I came very close to backing out and going back to Duncan when I initially published. I'm glad I didn't and that I didn't let myself be manipulated into thinking that I was exaggerating. I hope things improve from now on. Update 3. I've decided to travel. Duncan and I had planned our honeymoon for a few weeks after the wedding. Although it won't be a honeymoon anymore, I had invested a considerable amount in the reservations, so I thought, why not? I'll take a solo trip through Southeast Asia. It may seem strange to some, but I need a break and, after being in a relationship for 3 years, I need to restart and, above all, rediscover how to do things for myself. I haven't been in touch with him, which brings me both relief and sadness because, despite everything that has happened, I miss him. Of course, I'm not going to get back together with him, but it's not easy to let go of a long-standing bond, so I need this trip to reorient myself and clear my mind. The situation is not ideal, but I must learn to make the best of it.